With the launch of Intel's Z390 chipset, as well as the latest 9th generation series of processors, there's a lot of PC DIY enthusiasts out there that are interested in building a system, not necessarily for gaming, but actually maybe on the whole other end of the spectrum, for more prosumer or professional needs, whether that's content creation, whether it's science and simulation, or advanced productivity. At the same time, these boards that we're going to be talking about in our Prime series, the Z390-A, as well as the WS Z390 Pro models, offer a really great foundation for any one of these usage models. They're going to offer an outstanding overclocking experience, of course, ASUS tried and true stability, reliability, and durability, a rich set of features which cover everything from cooling and connectivity for all your cooling needs, as well as robust storage options, and a wide range of additional improvements that include audio and networking. So let's go ahead and find out quite a bit more about what makes these two boards so special. So first up, let's quickly talk about the overall look and feel for these boards. In terms of the overall aesthetics, they're quite a bit different, but they both look fantastic, and they both, I think, follow actually a pretty similar design convention in terms of being definitely different and not gamer-esque, and having a fresh, clean, modern, and more professional aesthetic. With the Prime series, you've got white, that's the predominant actually color that's present here, that's got a bold, fresh, clean feel to it that looks really good, especially if you pair it with other types of white accessories and components. If you're also an RGB enthusiast, it works really well because white actually reflects a lot of the lighting that either comes from the onboard lighting that's featured on the motherboard, as well as actually other RGB enabled components, whether you're talking things about like memory, fans, LED strips, chassis with integrated lighting, or any number of other, of course, RGB accessories. Now, if you're wondering about control and connectivity for RGB lighting, the board, of course, fully supports ASUS AURA Sync, so any one of the ASUS AURA enabled products that are out on the market will fully be synchronized and controlled via the motherboard and its supported RGB header. Now, if we take a look here at the Pro motherboard under our WS series, it goes in the whole other end of the spectrum. It's a much more monochromatic color scheme on the board, but it looks really clean, really professional. It fits really, really well, of course, with a wide range of the accessories that are out there in the marketplace that fall under either black, silver, or grays, and it just really screams, I think, for a clean, stylized system. And of course, if you're somebody that is not into the overall aesthetic vibes, using a transparent system, this board is equally really built to perform and not focus in the aesthetics in that regard. But for some users that are out there that still want to be able to add a little bit of flair to the system, the board does still also feature support for ASUS AURA Sync, just like the -A, where it does feature a dedicated header. So again, you can synchronize it with any number of ASUS AURA Sync enabled products. Now, moving past aesthetics, and really the most important part for these boards, I think, is going to be the overall performance design. Anybody that's really looking to be able to build a system that's leveraging the -A or the Pro Series board, I think is really interested in ensuring that they're going to get an amazing experience when it comes to enabling the best performance possible from these K-series CPUs, as well as being able to leverage the amazing DRAM controller that's implemented in these 9th Gen series processors. And in both these regards, these boards are definitely going to be able to offer you an impressive level of overclocking capability and stability for these K-series CPUs, as well as for the highest performing DRAM DDR4 kits that are on the market. So in terms of the overall design, it's important to first and foremost focus on, let's say, the power componentry. So when you talk about these boards, the power componentry is actually part of the VRM assembly, or the voltage regulation modules. These are comprised of things like the actual power stages, inductors, and capacitors of the actual power stage itself. Traditionally on most motherboards, the power stage is actually comprised not of what's called a power stage, but a two-stage component system, one being a MOSFET and one being a driver. For these boards, they actually feature a unified system which offers much better thermal efficiency and overall much better performance. When you combine these together with the high performance inductors, which help to provide the amperage or the power for the CPU as you're cranking up that CPU frequency, you can feel really confident in the overall performance of these boards. Now, in regards to one difference that you will find in terms of some of the power componentry, the WS does feature actually higher performing inductors, which even go to a whole nother level. And this is generally because of the overall design focus that you have on WS boards, where really they're designed for a much more consistent level of continuous high-level loading operation. Along with that, they also capacitors, which are quite impressive and very good performing on the actual Prime A series board, are 5K rated, but on the WS board you'll find that they're actually 10K rated, so double the overall effective lifespan. That being noted, when we actually take a look at the DRAM performance, both these boards once again are going to be very similar, and they're both going to be able to offer you extremely impressive DDR4 overclocking capabilities. What we've actually found is that for the latest generation 9th Gen series of processors, the memory controller on some of these CPUs can actually reach considerable considerably in excess of 4,000 megahertz. This is fantastic not only for gamers, but definitely for content creators or professionals that are heavily utilizing large density and high frequency memory kits. These kits generally can offer much better bandwidth, so when you go about things like linear workflows and advanced editing applications or advanced batch conversion for raw-based photography or science and simulation workloads, which really are utilizing a lot of memory bandwidth, being able to run at much higher frequencies really can provide you huge uplifts in the overall performance experience, along with the performance uplift that you get by overclocking your processor. And for this generation, both these motherboards feature an entirely brand new memory design, which is referred to as OptiMem 2. This is where we've actually gone through and improved the actual trace implementation. The trace implementation is essentially the signaling paths that occur between the CPU socket and the DRAM banks themselves. And for this generation, we've gone ahead and actually separated some of these trace paths in different layers of the PCB board, along with implementing a very large and extensive ground plane. This really helps to mitigate any type of cross-contamination or signal interference from other parts of the board. And what this really ultimately allows for is for much higher frequencies to be seen in this generation compared to previous generation. Most of our Z390 series of motherboards were generally limited to about 3,800 to, let's say, about 4,000 megahertz, with both of these boards actually being able to be validated for speeds that are even beyond 4266. So if you're really looking to be able to get a great experience, both of these boards are going to have you covered. Now, last but not least, in regards to the overall performance-oriented design on these motherboards, is going to be the implementation of a brand new MemOK2 technology. And what this is a brand new combination of hardware and firmware that carefully actually monitors the way that memory is working within the system. One of the most common pain points that a lot of builders face is going to be memory initialization. They install memory into the system, and the system might not respond accordingly, having maybe issues powering on and going through what's referred to as the power on self-test. By actually enabling the MemOK function on these boards, the actual board will automatically monitor essentially that initialization state. And if there's an issue that's going on, the actual board can attempt to automatically on a low level make subtle adjustments to things like voltage, timing, frequencies, and other memory related parameters, allowing the actual board to effectively power on and post. Now, going hand in hand with our performance-related design is actually going to be our overclocking design. For many of you that might be, let's say, in that segment of, let's say, professionals or prosumers, or even maybe gamers that really want to be able to unlock the power of these latest K series or unlock CPUs, you might not necessarily be as knowledgeable about all the ins and outs when it comes to overclocking. So how do you readily realize the benefits of these CPUs, especially if you're making the investment in higher-end CPU parts as well as more advanced cooling solutions? Well, the great thing is that both these motherboards feature our AI optimization or auto overclocking technology. What we've actually gone ahead and done is baked in some really impressive hardware, firmware, and software to allow for a much more turnkey experience to really maximize the overclocking capability of these K parts and whatever cooling solution you have in play. So how does this work? It's pretty straightforward. Whatever CPU you drop into these boards, on the immediate time that you go ahead and power up the system, we'll immediately begin to analyze these CPUs so that if you either jump into the UEFI BIOS or into the operating system, the AI optimization options are present in both, you'll actually be provided a full readout of the estimated overclocking capability of this part. Take, for instance, if you drop in a 9900K, this part can effectively boost to a single core frequency of 5 gigahertz, but it cannot reach 5 gigahertz across all cores automatically, but it can overclock to that frequency and actually even higher. And so what our actual predictive technology will provide to you is, let's say, an estimated CPU frequency for that CPU. That might be maybe 5, maybe 5.1 gigahertz. In addition to this, it actually will provide to you a full breakdown of, let's say, the target voltages to be able to reach that frequency, along with other subtle optimization enhancements which help to really improve the overall performance of your overclock, such as the cache ratio frequency, cache ratio voltage, and even AVX-based frequencies. For some professionals out there, they might realize that AVX is carefully linked in with many more professional applications. So being able to know whether or not an overclock can work under an AVX-enabled application is extremely critical. Now again, if you're somebody that doesn't know about all these different parameters, or especially about more subtle parameters like different types of voltages, like manual voltages, offset voltages, or adaptive voltages, this is where, again, AI optimization takes care of all this work for you. So once you see this predictive information, all that you're actually asked to do is go into the operating system and run either your general applications you might use for, I'd say, maybe 15, 30 minutes worth of time, or run a general stress test. What's done at this time, and when your system is still working in a stock fashion, is a monitoring of your CPU's temperature. As we're tracking this temperature and we're seeing actually the thermal telemetry, or essentially the overall performance of your cooling solution with your CPU, we come to actually define what is really the key recommended overclock for your system. Once this is completed, you can click the next button, it'll apply the overclock, reboot, and you're pretty much good to go. You've gone ahead and easily and effectively induced a high-level overclock just by the click of a button. Again, whether it's inside the UEFI or within the operating system. This is really the easiest and most effective and reliable way to allow you to go ahead and maximize the investment in a K-series part and in whatever cooling solution you might have, whether it's a high-performance tower heatsink, a closed-loop water cooler, or a custom water cooling loop. And for those of you that are enthusiasts and really are going to be using your system consistently over a long period of time and under varying workloads, they'll also appreciate the fact that we have some predictive technologies that adapt in real time. And what this does is that, let's say over a period of time where you might have changes in, let's say, ambient temperature, or maybe changes in your actual cooling solution's performance, whether it's things like the radiator maybe being obstructed by dust, debris, or dander, or maybe the pump maybe working at a subpar level. If the actual cooling performance is monitored to be actually less effective, then we actually can automatically reduce the clock frequency. Once again, helping to make sure that you get a stable and reliable level of an overclocking experience, whether it's going to be on this Pro board or whether it's going to be on the Dash A. Now, going hand in hand with a performance-oriented design, the overclocking options that we've already talked about is going to be actually how we cool the overall power componentry as well as the system as a whole once you overclock it. Because if you essentially don't have effective cooling in place, you can't ensure stable and reliable operation over the long term. And with both these boards, they actually feature some impressive cooling technologies to really help you feel confident in the long-term reliability of your system. For the Dash A, you'll have some high-performance Vrm heat sinks, 2 specific heat sinks that help to cover the entirety of the Vrm array so that you can have stable and reliable operation. Now, these are a little bit smaller than the overall Vrm heat sinks that you're going to have that are going to be on the WS series of board, but they still feature multiple fins and large surface area points to allow for effective and reliable heat dissipation. And they also actually offer a cool design implementation where they actually have 2 points of contact, one that makes direct contact with the actual power stages, as well as another one which makes direct contact with the power inductors themselves on the board. Now, beyond this, in terms of additional cooling enhancements that the board features, it also has an M.2 heatsink for one of the M.2 slots to help to make sure that if you're dropping in a higher performance PCIe Gen 4 NVMe SSD, you can make sure that you're getting the best performance possible, even if that drives under heavy usage. Now, looking over at the WS board, this board is equally paired in terms of ensuring a stable level of reliable operation due to the advanced heatsink design implementation. So you've got 2 independent heatsinks for the overall VRM stage. And this board ups the ante compared to the Dash A by having 2 M.2 heatsinks that are actually combined into a much larger heatsink array, which is also connected to a heat pipe. Now, the reason why this actually much more extensive heatsink is in place on this board is because the WS also features a PCIe bridge. This is going to be important when we touch on more of the extensive connectivity specifications that differ between the WS board and the Dash A. Now, going directly in hand with the actual physical cooling designs that we just talked about is actually going to be the overall connectivity and control options that you have for cooling on these boards. So both of these motherboards feature our FanExpert 4 technology. And this is actually a combination of not only the physical connectivity, but also the firmware and software experience at how you can ultimately control all your connected fans and cooling devices. This is critical because this really allows you to make sure that you're getting the best experience in terms of the overall effectiveness and the overall efficiency from your cooling, as well as also making sure you hit that right balance in terms of the acoustics of your system so that the system is quiet when it doesn't necessarily need the highest level of cooling, and of course is responsive in accordance to the cooling loads that you place on your system when you're under more demanding loads. So how's this all break down? Well, for FanExpert 4, when you take a look at the physical headers on this motherboard, there's going to be tons of headers so that it doesn't matter which type of fans you're utilizing, whether they're 3-pin or 4-pin, so DC or PWM fans, the boards are going to be fully compatible with any one of those. Now, of course, for users that go about building their system and they have a far number of different types of fans that are set up, whether they're the fans that came with their cooler, fans that came with the chassis, or add-in fans, you don't have to worry about any of this because with FanExpert 4, it offers an actual profiling and calibration option. Now, this is inside the UEFI as well as within the operating system that you can execute this calibration process, where essentially it will directly induce a ramping speed policy to any one of the fans to track their minimum and maximum level of operation. Once we figure out that minimum and maximum level operation, you can go in and customize your own fan curve so that if you wanted to respond at certain target temperatures for, let's say, more responsive cooling, or if you wanted to essentially not be as responsive and be quieter, you can go ahead and make those adjustments. If you want to control ramping speed, so how fast the fan actually ramps when it does need to actually kick up, you can control that. This is really nice because if you don't want your fans to essentially have more of a veering sound, you can go ahead and have, let's say, a longer ramping speed where it's more smooth, going from, let's say, 1600 RPM to 2000 RPM. And this is a really nice level of control to really be able to dial in the level of acoustics that you're looking for in your system. In addition to this, these boards also offer extensive granularity and control at how you can approach what's called temperature input mapping. Now, I'd say in higher end gaming builds and definitely in more prosumer and professional type workstation builds where you've got complex storage array configurations, multiple add-in cards, whether you're talking about capture cards or GPU configurations, there's a lot of other temperature sources that are outside the GPU where it actually might make more sense to actually have your fans respond to those temperature sources. And with both of these motherboards, they support temperature input mapping. What that means essentially is that if you want your front intake fans to respond to, let's say, your graphics card temperature, you could do that. Or maybe you want them to respond to your M.2 RAID configuration, you can also do that. Or maybe you want them to respond to a hard drive array configuration, or maybe multiple 4K capture cards. You could set temperature probes for those points and ultimately have your fans respond to any number of these different type of combinations. Every single header has the ability to be mapped to a different temperature source. And for really complex types of builds that not only have a huge number of fans, but also different temperature sources that you might want response to, both these motherboards support our fan extension card. This is an optional accessory that can be plugged into the board that gives you 3 additional headers. It also will give you the ability to have 3 additional temperature sources by connecting thermal probes to any number of different points, whether they're inside the chassis or physically on devices. I'm also a big fan of these boards supporting PWM output on all the chassis fan headers and on the fan extension card. For system configurations where you might be running as many as maybe 7 to 12 fans, the ability to have one single header, use a PWM fan splitter cable, and control between 2 to 4 additional fans on that one single header really gives you a lot of control and flexibility to really be able to have the cooling setup easily and effectively controlled by one single source, the motherboard. So moving things along, let's talk about the audio and networking on these motherboards. In terms of audio, we've got a really nice audio design with Crystal Sound 3.0. This really provides a nice improvement in terms of the music, movies, games experience that you're going to have on these boards. Now, in terms of the actual design implementation in itself, it's pretty impressive. You have an isolated audio path that's been built onto the board, which keeps the audio section essentially independent of the rest of the motherboard. This helps to mitigate any type of noise or interference that can present itself, like humming, popping, hissing, any number of different types of sounds that you might have that you traditionally might hear on boards that don't feature audio isolation. Beyond that, you have a shielded, high-quality S21220 audio codec that's present on these boards, audio-grade capacitors, which help to improve the overall richness, warmth, and tonality. You also have other improvements, including improved volume strength on this. So if you're using, of course, monitors or headphones for audio playback, you get a nice improved level of dynamic range that really helps to open up the overall sound stage. So moving into networking, both these boards feature Intel-based NICs. These are really the best received NICs in the community in terms of their overall reliability, performance, and management options. The WS board, though, steps it up to a whole nother level by offering dual NIC implementations, as well as a server-grade network controller that's been built on board. This allows you to actually have offload-based processing, so that the actual processor itself is not necessarily taking some penalty by actually rendering network packets. This helps to provide additional performance benefits, especially in the long term if you're heavily utilizing your network connection by making connections to, let's say, a NAS array, some type of SAN configuration, or other point-to-point LAN-based configurations. Now, for many of you might be, of course, interested in the key specifications for these boards, and both of them are definitely packed in, offering, I think, the latest in generation for all the key technologies and specifications you're looking for. Now, in terms of these key items, of course, you're going to have support for PCI Gen 3 by 4 with full NVMe support. So if you're looking to use the latest generation of M.2 based SSDs, you're good to go. These boards also fully support Intel Optane, not only in terms of their storage accelerators, but also their actually higher performing variants, whether you're talking about PCI Express or even the latest generation 900 or 905P series, which utilize U.2. Although for U.2 implementation, that is exclusively present on the WS series board. And we'll talk a little bit more on why that's present. Now, if you're talking about other forms of connectivity, such as USB 3.1, both Gen 1 and Gen 2, both these boards have you covered, and they also both feature USB 3.1 Gen 2 dedicated headers. So the latest generation of chassis that feature connections for that can both be supported on these motherboards. Now, beyond this, for the latest I/O specification standard, including USB Type-C as well as Thunderbolt 3, both these motherboards are fully compatible. But let's break this down a little bit further. For the physical connections themselves in terms of USB 3.1 Gen 2, as well as Type A and Type C connectivity, both these boards physically have them available to you on board. But if you're actually looking for Thunderbolt 3 connectivity, this comes in actually the form of our Thunderbolt 3 add-in card. Now, both these motherboards feature a special and industry-exclusive connection, which allows this to interface with a Thunderbolt 3 add-in card. Once you install the actual add-in card, there's a specialized cable that you'll run from that card to the header on either one of these motherboards. But once that is connected, it will allow you to go ahead and leverage the 40 gigabits of throughput that's offered on the Thunderbolt 3 add-in card. This, along with, of course, all the other rich connectivity that's present on this board, really allows you to have the most extensive level of connections available to you on Z390 series of motherboards. Now, keeping in the vein of talking about add-in cards, both these motherboards support our Hyper M.2 add-in card, which will allow you to go ahead and run up to 4 M.2 SSDs in a single add-in card that can be installed directly into a PCI Express slot. Now, if we take a closer look on the WS board, we noted that this board does feature some more advanced forms of integrated connectivity, and this is due to the inclusion of a specialized PCIe bridge. This PCIe bridge actually allows the board to essentially have more flexibility in PCIe bandwidth. What this means that this board has really been tailor-built to be able to support concurrent operation of multiple high-speed ports. Traditionally, on most standard Z390 boards like the -A or any other Z390 motherboard, when you begin to use multiple GPU configurations, or let's say a GPU and 2 M.2 SSDs, you'll begin to effectively run out of PCIe bandwidth. But with the PCIe bridge, we can actually run far more concurrent PCIe connections. So that if you're looking to be able to use, let's say, U.2 and M.2 and multiple PCIe slots and a graphics card slot, this board has it available to you. This is the reason why the WS board features quite a number of additional headers compared to, let's say, the -A or a number of other Z390 motherboards. Now, beyond this, this board also takes the specification support even further, where it features specialized validation for complex add-in cards. So if you're using specialized RAID controller cards, complex multi-gigabit Ethernet port cards, high-performance capture cards, GPU compute cards, or many other type of specialized cards, which when sometimes run on traditional motherboards can have lockup or initialization issues, you can feel much more confident in the overall reliability and initialization. So wrapping things up, we've talked about a lot of different aspects when it comes to the Z390-A as well as to the WS Z390 Pro. Both these motherboards are really going to offer an outstanding foundation for any type of build, but definitely if you're looking for something that falls more into that professional landscape, whether you're a content creator, whether you're looking for advanced productivity, science and simulation, or ultimately, like I said, an awesome just DIY gaming system, these boards are really going to offer a great experience. Doesn't matter whether you're talking about overclocking, improved audio networking, robust fan controls, or tons of rich connectivity options, including things like support for our Hyper M.2 card, Thunderbolt 3, and much more. Ultimately, if you're looking to be able to build a great next generation platform that's leveraging the Z390 chipset and the latest 9th generation series of processors, you're definitely going to want to check out what we offer on the Prime series as well as the WS series of motherboards from ASUS.